Just left my house, going to Australia.
Welcome to Modern Grand Tour with me, Garland Lowe. Join the journey as we spend 3 months travelling to the other side of the world. Like the Grand Tours of old, we'll immerse ourselves in foreign cultures and feed our curiosity for the world with the diverse education that comes only with travel. We'll go on walking tours to understand the most popular and historic sites. We'll visit museums and pick out the most important objects and events. We'll talk to the locals and ask them what they think about their country. And there'll be some special moments off the beaten track. Travelling light with one small backpack, the itinerary for this trip begins with Belgium, followed by the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Russia, where we'll couch surf across the country via the Trans-Siberian Railway, then catch my first flights to South Korea and Japan before finally arriving in Australia, just in time for my best friend's wedding. In this opening episode of the series, we'll explore the medieval fairy tale cities of the lively and epic Ghent and the sleepy and frozen in time Bruges. But first, having taken the overnight coach from London, our adventure begins at Belgium's and the European Union's capital, Brussels.
Right, just come out of the bus. I'm about to go to the city centre. Not sure how I do that. Yeah, about to work out how to start my day in Brussels. Right. Oh Christ. Got myself on a walking tour in the middle of Brussels. A lot of gold. There's a lot of gold around.
The number one tourist spot in Brussels, and often considered the most beautiful square in Europe, the Grand Place, offers a wonderful assault on the eyes with its Gothic detail and its Baroque shine. Originally the headquarters of powerful workers' guilds in the 1400s, it is now surrounded by cafes, museums and the towering City Hall. And in a quirky tradition since the 1970s, the Grand Place hosts a biennial event called the Flower Carpet, involving 600,000 flowers, all perfectly arranged to provide absolute hell for hay fever sufferers.
It is, ladies and gents, this is Manneken Pis, the big man of Brussels, our mascot, and yes, he's that small. Sorry.
Manneken Pis, meaning little pea man in Dutch, was put in place in 1619, and although there are several legends as to the child's story and identity, my favourite is that the cheeky boy is the 12th century Duke Godfrey III, who as an infant apparently had his basket hung to a tree to encourage his soldiers during battle. The young Godfrey then somehow managed to pee on the opposing army, resulting eventually in their loss, which no doubt was, bitter tasting. Throughout his existence, Little Man P has been dressed in different outfits, and in modern times, for special events, he's even hooked up to a keg of beer, which passers-by can enjoy for free by placing their cup into the Little Man's pee stream.
Right now in this city, you're standing in the cradle of these characters, world famous.
The Adventures of Tintin are a series of 24 comic albums published between 1929 to 86, which follows the Belgian reporter around the world. And as you can see from this map, it's pretty good going from the teenager.
So there's another bunch of characters that were created by Belgian artists that you definitely have heard about. They're small, they're blue. Yeah, the Smurfs. Pictorial art around here, comic books, but not only, is a big thing in Belgium. Now, see the Belgian flag flying proudly on top. 3 colors for the 3 linguistic communities that we have around here. Black for German speakers, yellow for Dutch speakers, red for French speakers.
Having learnt about the flag, our enthusiastic tour guide then surprised everyone with a change of mood as he mentioned the Congo. Now, I'd never heard of the Belgian-Congo relationship, but if that seemingly odd pairing of countries wasn't enough, my intrigue further piqued when he said that although what he was about to say next isn't a nice story, he felt that it was important to tell it. As do I. In 1830, after the Belgian Revolution, the United Kingdom of the Netherlands sees the French and Flemish-speaking Catholic provinces in the south separate from their Dutch-speaking Protestant neighbours in the north, thereby creating Belgium. When Belgium's second ever king, King Leopold II, takes over, he believes the colony will propel his new country to greatness. But with much of the world already part of other European empires, King Leopold orders a 5-year exploration of the much unknown Central African region, specifically the Congo. In 1885, the Berlin Conference is held where European leaders agree upon the partition of this massive continent in what is known as the Scramble for Africa. At the meeting, unlike the other leaders who would colonise Africa for their country, Leopold incredibly gains the Congo as a personal asset by pretending to have humanitarian intentions. In the newly named Congo Free State, Leopold in reality creates an army made up of Africans from other countries to enforce slave labour amongst the Congolese villages for the collection of first ivory and then, in more horrific circumstances, rubber. If villagers missed their rubber quota, they would be shot to death and their hands severed and brought back to their Belgian superiors as proof that the army was doing their job of enforcement. However, often against orders, the army would go hunting, and so to cover up their missing and costly bullets, the soldiers would cut off the hands of completely innocent people to deceive their Belgian superiors. In effect, hands became a currency in exchange for bullets and unfulfilled rubber quotas, which led to some villages attacking other villages for the sole purpose of acquiring chopped off hands, so that the victorious village could give the army their neighbours' hands rather than their own. When the Leopold administration was questioned as to why so many hands had been cut off, they simply lied and said it was cancer of the hands. Leopold used his fortune from rubber to finance major building work, including the Royal Palace and the Cinquantenaire Arch, which one rebellious Belgian politician called at the time the Arch of the Severed Hands. With the increased exposure of Leopold's activities in the Congo Free State, he eventually sells his personal assets to the Belgian government, but only after burning the Congo Administrative Archive, stating, "I will give them my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there." It is estimated that Leopold exploited the Congo for more than $1 billion in today's currency, causing the deaths of 10 million Congolese people. Now, even within all the exploitation of past European colonialism, the story of Belgium's colonial project, limited to only Central Africa, stands out as particularly horrific. But maybe what is even more shocking is that Belgium have done a pretty bad job of acknowledging this period of history. So let's have a look at 4 examples of silence and lies. Number 1. In 1960, when the country now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo gained independence, the Belgian king patronisingly declared at the ceremony, "The independence of the Congo is the crowning of the work conceived by the genius of King Leopold II. He did not come to you as a conqueror, but as an agent of civilization." As the country's newly elected and first ever Prime Minister listened with incredulity, Patrice Lumumba revised his speech to the shock of the elites in the room, but to the cheers of the Congolese people listening to the radio in their homes. "We have experienced forced labour in exchange for pay that did not allow us to satisfy our hunger, to clothe ourselves, to have decent lodgings, or to bring up our children as dearly loved ones. Morning, noon and night we were subjected to jeers, insults and blows because we were Negroes. Who will ever forget that the black was addressed as tu, not because he was a friend, but because the polite vous was reserved for the white man." Number 2. The Belgian state, simply by inaction, has systematically suppressed the story of the Congo. As one Belgian historian writes, "There's an entire generation that wasn't brought up with the Congo. It wasn't mentioned in our history classes, and this concealment continues at the level of state administration. There is still an unwillingness to open the lid on our colonial past. Some of the archives are still very difficult to access, something which I find indefensible." It is not until 1998, when the book King Leopold's Ghost is published, that the wider public are exposed to the full horrors of the Congo. Number 3. Just outside Brussels, showing some incredible gold, the Royal Museum of Central Africa, itself a building paid for by the Congo prophet, had until 2005 completely ignored the exploitation and suffering of the Congolese people. Indeed, in the remedial efforts felt necessary since the Congo entered public consciousness, the museum closed for renovation in 2013 and currently states on its website, "When the museum reopens in June 2018, Belgium's colonial past will be addressed capably and openly." Number 4. If the decision, or rather non-decision, to keep Leopold's statues wasn't bad enough, the rewriting of history from the epitaphs attached to these statues really is a kick in the teeth for the Congolese people. This one reads, "I have undertaken the work of the Congo in the interests of civilization," and it is flanked by 2 sculptures on either side representing the before and after of Leopold's supposed work. The before sculpture shows the Congolese naked, bounded by rope and in fear of their whip-holding Arab slave master, whilst the after sculpture shows them as clothed, Christian and composed trade workers, with the person seated on the left even using a microscope. Then there's this Leopold monument, where the sign placed next to the statue of the Congolese people on the left reads, "The gratitude of the Congolese to Leopold II for having liberated them from slavery under the Arabs." Indeed, in 2004, an activist group provided some reality to the monument by cutting off the hand of one of the Congolese statues. And it is not the only Leopold statue that has been the focus of protest. These two cover him in symbolic red paint. This one calls him a mass murderer, and this one states assassin, which, to further reveal the impact of Leopold's colonialism, is connected with the 1961 murder of the Democratic Republic of the Congo's first Prime Minister, which the Belgian government are strongly accused of being involved. Now, in terms of the extent that the Belgian state should feel shame regarding events that happened over a century ago, which as individuals they had nothing to do with, is not an easy question to answer. However, it is undeniably shameful when there is little or no acknowledgement of such an atrocity. And the reason why all of this is important, and the reason why history, good or bad, but especially the bad, needs to be learnt, is so that the bad doesn't happen again.
Congratulations, you've made it till the end of the tour. Bravo! Bravo! Yes, come on.
After patting my back, I went to visit the so-called European Quarter. Now, because of its unfortunate location between the great historical powers of France, Germany and England over the Channel, Belgium is known as the battleground of Europe, having provided the setting for major conflicts such as in the 100 Years' War, the Napoleonic Wars, the First World War and the Second World War. Because of this, if you thought that Belgium as a central and neutral location is the reason for the European Union to base itself there, you would be wrong. In fact, the reason is much, much simpler. Belgium begins with a B. Because in 1958, when the European leaders could not agree on a location, a provisional location was decided on by the country who came first in the alphabet. And then after, they simply couldn't be bothered to move. So there you have it. The next time you need to make a really important decision, just do as the EU and pick the one furthest away from Z. Having just seen the EU flag dangle off Leopold's Arch of the Severed Hands, which you could say is metaphorically fitting, I then went to visit the EU itself. But before we go in, cue Anthem of Europe. Brussels, the unofficial capital of the European Union, hosts the four most powerful of the 7 EU institutions. The first, the European Council, is made up of Prime Ministers/Presidents who decide on the EU's political direction at EU summits, but who hold no formal power to create laws. It's the next 3 institutions combined who create laws. The European Commission is the EU's government. It is made up of 1 commissioner from each EU country who manages a portfolio. They make the laws. The European Parliament is the EU's lower house, similar to the UK House of Commons. It is made up of directly elected MEPs or members of the European Parliament. They approve or reject the Commission's laws. The Council of Ministers is the EU's upper house, similar to the UK House of Lords. It is made up of appointed ministers from each EU country. They also approve or reject the Commission's laws. The other 3 institutions are the European Central Bank, the Court of Justice and the Court of Auditors. Now, of these 7 EU institutions, only 1 has a visitor centre, which is snazzily named the Parliamentarium. Inside there were scale model buildings, a history section, an area to listen to EU citizens talk about Europe, a floor map showing EU initiatives, a virtual parliament building and a souvenir shop. Okay, so even with all the high-tech exhibits, I just didn't find anything exciting or fun. But then as I was leaving, me and my new EU friend found this.
Okay, right, let's get in. Right, so we're just both looking to that camera there. You get it? Hey! That's amazing! Best part of my day, I think. Oh, so chuffed.
The next day I went back to the Grand Place to visit the City Museum. Inside there were some olden day sculptures, some olden day crockery, a couple of rugs from the olden days, and a rather fetching hat. I then followed the suit of armour telling me to go up the posh stairs, hoping that there would be others just like him in a kind of terracotta warrior / Lord of the Rings style formation. Instead there were a scale model, olden days, and a painting that I would simply describe as big. Then there were some more posh stairs, and at this point I thought, well, the building's nice, at least I got to go inside. And then I reached the upper floor, and was greeted by this. And then these. The Manneken Pis wardrobe collection displays just some of the 900 odd costumes that are gifted to him from different institutions. Displayed here are mostly official gifts from other countries, which maybe makes the little man P Belgium's most popular ambassador. Cue Belgian national anthem.
Definitely my favourite bit.
Then after acculturating myself to the Brussels cuisine and viewing the Brussels art and watching some Brussels sport, it was time for my next city.
I get to the city centre from here.
When you take tram number 1,
Okay.
it's the 7th stop.
I'm trying number 1. That's amazing. Thank you very much. I can't believe this is the best thing ever. Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
Ghent's number 1 tourist spot is its city centre, comprised of the River Lea and its café-filled quays either side, the medieval Graslei on the east bank and the slightly later looking Korenlei on the west. As one of the most important trade centres in medieval Europe, the river was key in Ghent's prosperity, producing the rich grass suitable for herding sheep, which created wool for weaving cloth. Demand for cloth led to Ghent importing English wool, so when the 100 Years' War between England and France began, Mayor Jacob van Artevelde stood in the square of Markt and declared Ghent's allegiance to England, where his statue points towards. St. Bavo's Cathedral is most famous for holding a Van Eyck brothers painting that is considered the most influential painting in world history. Of course, on the day I visited, the painting was closed for viewing. Fortunately, Google Images never closes. The Ghent Altarpiece, completed by Hubert and Jan van Eyck in 1432, was the world's first major oil painting, moving away from the medieval style to showing the detail and perspective that would define the Renaissance. Depicting the Annunciation when the altarpiece is closed, when opened it reveals an assortment of Catholic icons such as the Virgin Mary, Christ the King and John the Baptist in the top middle panels. However, the key panel, which the altarpiece is also known by, is the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, where Christ's crucifixion, the Eucharist and the Fountain of Life are all represented. Adding to its prestige, the Ghent altarpiece is considered the most coveted piece of art, having been stolen several times, most notably by Napoleon and Hitler. Indeed, the Ghent police still have an open case for the lower left panel that mysteriously went missing in 1934.
Ghent in those days was the largest city north of the Alps after Paris. 60,000 inhabitants. That's more than in London. Ghent was also a textile city. Later linen was more important. And in the 19th it was a cotton city. Not so deep here, only 1 meter. We had 3 water levels in the Middle Ages. When the enemy comes from the west or northwest, you could flood the terrains. And therefore you needed these waterlogs. It's a natural defense. Belgians always do it. So we never had a wall here, we didn't need to. 15, Antwerp and Amsterdam were the leading cities here. Ghent was far behind. And some years later it was all over. Charles V punished Ghent, and since that day Ghent is just a small town. We were not so heavily bombed during the wars, but the industry in the 19th did more damage, and then more monuments disappeared. In that street over there you have houses of 5 different centuries, and there's also something modern. But you're in Ghent today, nothing Bruges. Bruges, that's the Middle Ages. Nothing happened there since then. It's a museum. It's nice, but it closes at 6. Here it starts at 6. And then of course something you can miss in Ghent, the castle of the Condes, the Counts of Flanders, the first governors here, Since the days of the Vikings that were here, that were wooden fortresses. It was built in stone in 1180. The one who built it here, Count Philip of Elzas, was a crusader. He just came back from there. When you ever go to Syria, hope not for you, it's not so touristic there, but not so far from Homs, on a hilltop, you have a look-alike fortress.
Apart from being the home of the region's ruler known as the Count of Flanders, the Castle of the Counts was also a courthouse, and in the Middle Ages, criminal law dictated that no judgment could be made on someone without their confession. Thus, the non-so-subtle people of the Middle Ages designed several interesting methods to tease out an admission. So to get a sense of what living in medieval Europe must have been like, let's have a look at what the Castle Museum rather humorously calls its judicial objects.
Called a knife. Bit of Belgium torture there. The fifth Beatle. John Paul, George and Leonard. Not enjoying themselves much, I don't think. That's a nice one, isn't it? Imagine you got put with someone you really disliked. It's like medieval C-3PO. I don't like the look of that one. Look at this one. He's not even on the ground. It's like a fire on the ground. He's being held up with strings with a thing around his neck. And the thing on his neck is this. What? More steps. Wait. Go. Okay. Oh, that's easy. Oh wow. That is impressive. Nuts. Yeah, getting this bit nuts. Awfully pretty. Gothic, mythic, romantic, fairy tale. Like everywhere you turn. Amazing buildings, or river, or cathedral, or bridge. Oh, castle, then is that castle? We're going to call it day in Ghent. Or Ghent, as I've now been informed. Ghent. Ghent. Have I said it enough? Okay, that'll do.
Allee, Christine heeft sowieso gezegd. Dus maar die betekent niet dat we mee denken. En dat misschien best zijn.
We're in Bruges. Quite quiet. There's not many people here. Where is everyone? It's really odd. Where is everybody? Okay, this is a bit more lively. But still, I mean, this is pretty. It's just very quiet. Just goes to show, really. You can have a very pretty city. But if there's no one there, it kind of loses its purpose as a city, which is to be lived in, really. Right. Just got into my room. There's no one else here. I think I'm going to go out and take in the crazy nightlife. Woohoo!
To be fair, my previous tour guide did warn me.
Bruges, that's the Middle Ages. Nothing happened there since it's a museum. It's nice, but it closes at 6.
There's people hanging around. Everything is closed, which means for dinner I'm having nuts. Okay, which way's home? I don't know. I'm just going to walk and stroll because it's so quiet. It feels very safe. A bit too safe. Can you be too safe? Now this is a storefront. Ah, it's all chocolate. Look at all that chocolate. It's amazing. Oh, imagine that was open. I don't even want to try. So the alarm will go off and the police will speed up 100 miles an hour to catch the only criminal they've had in the last 10 years. Because nothing happens here. Well, it does seem more lively in the morning. In the daytime now, it's lovely, isn't it? Well, I've got to keep walking because I'm on my way to another walking tour. My walking tour started in the big statue in the town square, And there it is. Not that. That's not a big statue. There's the big statue. Ooh. Watch out for the cyclists. Look at loads of them. Am I on the road or on the... Like, where's the road? And what is the pavement? It's like it's a free-for-all. Anyway. Here you guys are. There's a big thing. It's lovely, isn't it? A lot nicer in the daytime.
Easiest and 1%.
I don't know who this fella is. I'm sure he's important.
And he is important. This statue in the centre of Bruges is of Jan Breydel and Pieter de Coninck, a butcher and a weaver who in 1302 really didn't like their French overlords, as my tour guide will now explain.
And they organized a little revolution. They armed a little militia of common people to go around town, well, to kill the French people. And they did this on the most famous morning in Bruges' history. This was the mornings of Bruges, the Bersemetten, we call it. 18th of May, 1302. Well, they went knocking around town at 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, to kill all the French. Now, 5 o'clock in the morning, you can't tell a French person apart from a Flemish person. So we asked anyone opening the door to repeat the phrase Schild en Vriend. And Schild en Vriend means, well, shield and friend. Okay, and those are the two things a French person can pronounce well, the ske and the re, right? So they'd say Schild en Vriend, they'd say. And right then and there, well, they'd get a good day. Now, good day is a Flemish weapon, okay? So it was more like goodbye, and 2,000 French souls lost their lives that morning. And we thought, yay, we got rid of the French once and for all.
But they thought wrong, because 2 months later, the French returned for the Battle of the Golden Spurs. And this battle is important for 2 reasons. First, its impact on warfare, and second, its impact on Flemish, i.e. Northern Belgium, identity. So dealing with the first point, while the French were an army of knights and horseback, the Flemish were an army of commoners with pointy sticks, with the winner in this unequal battle being, spoiler alert, the Flemish. Because for the first time, this showed how infantry, taking advantage of marshy terrain and using pikes, could overcome cavalry, which encouraged infantry rebellions in other parts of Europe as the myth of the indomitable knight disappeared. Now, dealing with the second point, with this historic victory over the mighty France, modern-day Flemish nationalists have adopted the Battle of the Golden Spurs as the symbol for independence from French-speaking southern Belgium. Indeed, the regional celebration, called the Day of the Flemish Community, is held on the 11th of July, the date of the battle.
366 steps to get up and 83 meters high. The Belfry, like I said, was the symbol of city-state independence. Okay, now any Flemish city had a belfry, and the belfry supposedly as well, it protected every free citizen that lived inside the walls. Back in the Middle Ages, obviously this would be very busy because you were standing in the cloth halls and in the courtyard, so this would be every day from 18 hours a day. This would be swarmed with people.
Speaking to the guide earlier, and he was saying Ghent is a student town, which explains why it's much more livelier. There's no students here in Bruges.
Alright, now this is actually one of the smallest and most narrow streets in Bruges. Now what do you think it was used for in the Middle Ages? It was actually a ceremony back then. Every lord did it. And you see as well the religious figures peeking in, okay? Everyone eating, music being played, etc. It was a lively event.
Contrasting sharply with the medieval red light district, we then visited this beautiful haven of peace called a Beguinage, which I learned was a sanctuary for unmarried pious women, popular in the Flemish region in the Middle Ages. And then we went to this majestic Gothic church, next to this fairy tale bridge.
Bruges is like a film set. I mean, just look at this. Very nice in the daytime, Bruges. Very laid back and chilled. I've changed my mind in Bruges. I like it. Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
That guy up there, the guy in the corner with the moustache, that is Thierry d'Alsace, or Diederik van de Elzas, Count of Flanders. In the 12th century, he went on a crusade, and helped liberate Jerusalem.
Okay, with Bruges' character so heavily drawn from the Middle Ages, and with the Middle Ages so heavily linked with its most famous event, the Crusades, I want to explore what the Crusades actually is. So let's go back in time. With the Christian Byzantine Empire being gradually conquered more and more by the Muslim Seljuk Turks, the Pope in 1095 raises a call to arms for Christians to not only defend the Byzantine border, but to capture the holy city of Jerusalem, because, as he is reported to have said, God wills it. And in return, the Pope offers forgiveness for all sins. For people in the Middle Ages, this sin-free guaranteed passport to heaven for going on an adventure with lots of your friends was a pretty sweet deal. So jumping at this chance to defend Christendom, 100,000 knights and commoners set off for the east. Although Jerusalem was successfully captured, this first crusade is also remembered for its rampant pillaging of other Christians along the journey, and its indiscriminate massacre of unarmed Muslims and Jews, leaving the streets of Jerusalem ankle-deep in blood. Over the next 200 years, a total of 9 crusades would occur, with the Crusaders being successful only one more time, and this time not by force but by treaty. Now, why is any of this important? There are 3 reasons. 1. Although Jerusalem was lost again, and the Crusades largely unsuccessful in its recapture, the Europeans did manage to set up 4 Crusader states in the region surrounding the city. Lasting almost 200 years, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Edessa were the first examples of overseas colonialisation, a prototype for the system that would radically change the world over the next 1,000 years. 2. Due to the Crusades being at the height of the Islamic Golden Age, through cultural contact, Europeans learned from the scientifically and culturally more advanced Muslim societies, with the results evident in European culture today. For example, better personal hygiene with regular bathing and the use of soap, cooking with new ingredients such as sugar, spices, lemon and rice, using Arabic numerals as opposed to Roman numerals, and the game of chess. By contrast, it wasn't until 400 years later, with the developments in the Renaissance, that Muslims began learning from European culture. 3. And this is the most important. As we look back at the Crusades from our 21st century vantage point, we can see that there is an absurdity to killing people in the name of God. But let's be reminded that today, on the exact same land where the Crusader states once stood, the fighting in Israel, Palestine and Syria, albeit with greater political complexities, is fundamentally aimed at achieving the same medieval goals, but now with guns instead of swords. Okay, where were we? That's right. Thierry of Alsace had just helped liberate Jerusalem.
There's a thank you of the King of Jerusalem while he got, blood taken from the crucifix of Jesus. Okay, so he thought, great, thank you. So he brought it back and he kept it in the Basilica of his fortress. Now what we do every year though, is we do the Holy Blood Procession. It's the longest running procession in Western Europe actually. We've been doing it since 1150. That's when 20,000 of us, in a pretty drunk fashion, go around town parading with the Holy Blood.
With fortuitous timing, I'd entered just as the Holy Blood was being venerated. It was quite the dramatic moment, although I'm not sure how much of that was down to the church organist. At this point, realising the priest was standing over the blood, I thought it best to put the camera away.
Holy Christ, this is what I saw.
As an agnostic, I'm open to the fact that this is the blood of Jesus, which, if so, is probably one of the most amazing historical and spiritual objects I will ever witness. However, I'm also open to the idea that this is just an old piece of junk.
Congealed, I suppose, blood, really, isn't it? It didn't look very nice. But anyway, yeah, blood of Christ, inside a capsule. Okay, I think now I'm going to go on my way to, where am I going to go? Amsterdam? Right, why not? So here I am in the blah blah car for my very first time with the blah blah driver Maartin. Keep your eyes on the road, Maartin, though. One of the things that's fascinating in my 3 days here in Belgium is you're very particular about certain foods. So one is chocolate, another is beer, waffles, what you call fritters.
Oh, French fries.
Mussels.
Oh, that's so good.
For all 5 things I've mentioned, you loved all of them.
I'm a real Belgian.
You're a real Belgian person. That's when you know you're a real Belgian. The EU institutions, because they're based here, do you feel very much at the heart of Europe and very much a European?
I really feel like that because, like, when there's a European Commission and you're in Brussels, you feel it's something special going on. It really makes you feel like we mean something in Europe.
I think one of the reasons why British people don't feel so European is because we're an island.
Yeah.
So we have a physical disconnection to this idea of Europe.
Europe, like Belgium, Spain, and everything is connected. You can feel that.
Yeah, sure.
But when you go to the UK, you need to show your visa and everything, and here you just show your European passport and you're free to go.
Yeah. Would you be okay with Belgium no longer being officially a country but a state of the EU?
Like America?
Yeah.
I would be okay with that, because now we are a kingdom. We have a king. But in Belgium it's like 50-50 against the king. What does he do? Not that much. We even had the longest record of having no working government. We cannot agree the French part with the Dutch-speaking part. So there was a time that we almost tried to split up.
This divide between the French and the Dutch-speaking parts. Who is it that wants to leave?
The Dutch-speaking part wants to leave. We're the rich part. We have the sea, we have canals, we have to give them money. We always had a Flemish guy being like prime minister.
Yeah.
But then we had a French-speaking guy. He always has a butterfly tie, and his Dutch was very bad. So they're like, who rules a country that cannot speak to us, the Dutch-speaking part? Somebody who can speak 2 languages. If you come in Brussels, people expect you to speak 2 languages. Like, if I go to Brussels, I always, 90% of the time, I have to speak in French. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But some Dutch-speaking people are not okay with that. They're like, I want to be served in Dutch. So they go to a restaurant, and they say, yeah, I want the Coke, please. And then the people are asking in French, like, oh, okay, and what do you want for dinner? Those Dutch people, they will keep saying everything in Dutch. They will say, no, you have to learn a language. So it's frustration, it's politics, it's about money, it's everything combined.
And before I knew it, the international Brussels and the fairy tale cities of Ghent and Bruges were far behind me, and I had reached the bright lights of Amsterdam. Join me in the next episode where we'll do some window shopping, take advice from the locals,
If you're going to do drugs, please do it responsibly.
and visit one of the most famous houses in Europe. So until next time, Godspeed.